Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, March 7th. This is Africa 54.
Ghanaian students begin arriving home following evacuation from Ukraine. As the death toll from COVID-19 surpasses 6 million worldwide, South Africa steps up its pace on administering vaccines. And in a VOA exclusive, Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto discusses Kenya's economy, combating corruption, and his falling out with President Uhuru Kenyatta.
The worldwide death toll from COVID-19 has now surpassed 6 million. The last 1 million deaths compiled by Johns Hopkins University were recorded over the last 4 months. The tragic number confirmed Monday is believed to be a vast undercount. South Africa, in particular, has been hit hard with over 3.5 million infections and just over 99,000 deaths since the start of the outbreak. South Africa has administered over 31 million vaccine doses, according to official government figures. Nearly 50% of the adult population is fully vaccinated, but the wearing of masks remains mandatory. Russian forces on Monday are continuing their bombardment of Ukrainian cities in the northern and southern regions of the country. Ukrainian officials are worried that Russia may be moving closer to storming Kyiv. Ukraine's General Staff of the Armed Forces says Russian forces are focused on encircling Kyiv, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, and several other cities. A statement Monday accused Russia of violating international humanitarian law by shelling civilians. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is asking the international community on Monday to boycott Russian oil products and other exports. Zelensky is also calling for military aircraft for his air force to help defend his country. Zelensky asked, quote, how many more deaths and losses are needed to secure the sky over Ukraine? He is also urging a boycott of goods and supplies to Russia. A Russian Defense Ministry statement says that beginning Monday, for humanitarian purposes, Russia will declare open corridors for people to leave Ukraine. But some of the corridors will have people going to Russia on Russian ally Belarus. Ukrainian officials are rejecting Russia's plan, specifically evacuation paths that would send people to Russia and Belarus. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, says the number of refugees fleeing Ukraine surpassed 1.5 million Sunday, and the number of those refugees heading into Poland is expected to surpass 1 million. Poland's Ukrainian community of around 1.5 million is the region's largest and makes the country a major destination point for refugees fleeing Ukraine. Also, Ukrainians crossing to safety through Slovakia, Hungary, and northern Romania. Steadily increasing Western sanctions have so far failed to deter Russia's aggression as evacuation efforts in Ukraine stall because of indiscriminate bombing of civilian infrastructure. VOA's Arash Arabasadi has more.
Evacuation efforts in Ukraine's port city of Mariupol stall for a second straight day amid continued shelling by Russian forces. This despite a ceasefire announcement by the Russian Defense Ministry. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has appealed so far unsuccessfully for establishing a no-fly zone over Ukraine, a call Western powers reject.
I think there are a lot of things we can do to help Ukraine protect itself, both from airstrikes and missile strikes, but I think that people need to understand what a no-fly zone means. It's not some rule you pass that everybody has to oblige by. It's the willingness to shoot down the aircrafts of the Russian Federation, which is basically the beginning of World War III.
Russian forces continue pounding civilian and residential infrastructure with shelling in Ukrainian cities. Western powers, meanwhile, continue increasing sanctions on Russian President Vladimir Putin and those closest to him, sending tumbling the value of the Russian ruble. Putin called sanctions a declaration of war as he himself wages one on his neighbor.
This is not an easy way forward for President Putin. And as you know, we got 141 votes against the Russians at the Security Council. They are isolated. They're isolated in the Security Council, and they're isolated around the globe.
And while the Russian Defense Ministry released unverified images claiming to show a drone strike on Ukrainian military positions while Russian tanks roll through unidentifiable wooded areas, the mayor of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, says Ukrainians will fight for their country's life, but that the fight is bigger than Ukraine.
We don't want back to USSR. We see our future as democratic, modern European country. And we expect support from whole world, because we fighting not just for Ukraine, we fighting for values, we fighting for whole modern world. We have to stop Putin altogether.
Thousands of Ukrainians in cars on the outskirts of the capital line up to evacuate, with some placing signs in their car windows reading "Children" and "Evacuation." But Ukrainians fight on. This unverified video from the Ukrainian military claims to show a Russian combat helicopter shot down, the latest in a resistance effort widely regarded as fierce. As Ukrainian armed forces, many of whom were civilians just weeks ago, prepare for Russian advances on Kyiv, the West seems prepared to continue material support, stopping short of military engagement with Russia. Arash, Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
Hundreds of Ghanaian students were evacuated from Ukraine when Russia invaded. Some have returned home, but a number of Ghanaian and other African students are sheltering underground in Ukraine while waiting for a safe escape. Senanu Todd reports from Accra, Ghana.
Ghanaian students from Ukraine arrive at the Kotoka International Airport in Accra to meet their families. The students fled Ukraine at the start of the war to avoid being injured or killed. Their families say they are happy to welcome them back.
Extremely happy. Extremely happy. We are grateful to God for bringing them. We thank the government for bringing them. And as a parent, and I'm very sure any other parent who came to meet his or her ward share the same sentiment with me. We are very happy that they are here with us.
But the journey out of Ukraine, the students say, was traumatic. In the city of Chinifsi, the leadership of the National Union of Ghana Students, NUGS, mobilized 24 Ghanaians and 13 other African nationals on a bus and headed to the Romanian border. Samuel Jemeke, a fourth-year medical student and NUGS vice president, says the sound of bombs and visible smokes from neighboring cities was the trigger for them to flee.
We had a bombing, which is a city which is 2 hours away from my city, Ivano-Frankivsk. So we just made that decision that we're going to leave whatever it takes. So we did a necessary clearing from the school, and then we went to organize the bus. And we were ready to pay any amount the bus was going to charge us, so we just got on board and then we gathered the people, and then we set off.
At the Ukrainian border, they say there was heavy vehicular and human traffic. They had to abandon their bus and walk through the cold and dark for several hours. Jemeke says it took his team about 15 hours to cross the Ukrainian border amid competition with the locals, children and mothers for space to exit.
They were very harsh there, very harsh. I actually thought some of them were racist because they'll point at me and some of my friends, the blacks, that go back, you go back. That's the only English they can speak. You go back. Meaning don't come near the gates, else it's going to push you. And some of my friends were actually, I wouldn't say molested, but they'll pull you like this. Like maybe you've reached the gates, the tip of the gate, he's standing there. He can't push you to go back because you are going to hurt someone. So he'll pull you and push you inside.
At the Romanian border, they were welcomed by Ghanaian communities where the government of Ghana facilitated their travel back to Ghana. According to the government, there are about 1,200 Ghanaians in Ukraine, 78% of them students. On March 1st, the government had confirmed that about half of Ghanaians in Ukraine had fled to neighboring countries. Some students are still stuck in northeastern Ukraine, in the city of Sumy, which was attacked before they could flee. Sandwiched between Russian borders and war-torn cities, the students in Sumy have no route to access a safe border. In a WhatsApp chat with the public relations officer of the National Union of Ghana Students in Sumy, Benjamin Boateng said, "Right now, there is no power and no water here. We are fighting for our lives." He pleaded for the government to intervene and said they needed evacuation measures to get to them to any country, Russia, Hungary, anywhere, he said. Parents in Accra want the government to act fast.
From what we have heard right now, there seems to be food shortage. I mean, it looks like food is getting short in the markets in Sumi. So it's becoming something which is looking not so good. So my only plea to the government is to liaise with NUCS Sumi to see how best they can get these supplies to the students whilst intensifying their arrangements with the Russian government, at least for them to go into Russia.
In a meeting with parents, the government has assured families of people stuck in Ukraine that they will employ every diplomatic means to bring everyone to safety. Sana Anutod for VOA News, Accra, Ghana.
We'll have more on the Ukraine crisis in our live report coming up in just a few minutes. Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto spoke exclusively to VOA on Friday on a wide range of issues, including his fallout with President Uhuru Kenyatta, endemic corruption, and the poor state of Kenya's economy. During the interview that was live streamed on Africa 54's Facebook page, I asked the Deputy President to explain why he wants to be the next president of Kenya.
Kenya is at a point in the journey of a nation that requires decisive, firm, focused, and visionary leadership. And I believe that I have the qualities to take Kenya to the next level.
You have a vision, and you have been deputy president for the last 9 years.
Correct.
What are the things that didn't go well that you feel once you become the president of Kenya, you will make right?
When we came into office in 2013, we set about going to build a foundation. And that foundation, we appropriated that we needed to build a solid foundation of infrastructure, of training, of energy distribution. We built 700 kilometers of rail. We built 10,000 kilometers of tarmac. We've generated and distributed electricity to 8.5 million people. And we have built, apart from secondary education, we've built training for skills and competences with 170 technical training colleges. It is on that foundation that I believe the takeoff for Kenya is now ready. The things that we didn't manage to achieve in the last 8 years, and especially in the last 5 years. We had set out a program called the Big Four that had huge investments that would create jobs, that had investments in agriculture that would not only build capacity, it would also enhance productivity of our very progressive farming endeavors. And we had in it a whole program on universal health coverage and manufacturing. Unfortunately, the Big Four plan did not go as we had planned.
Why?
Because we got ourselves engaged in another program that was not part of the agenda upon which we were elected. And the program was what you know, or what is now called as the handshake and the BBI and everything else that went in that direction.
I get it, but before we get to the BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative that President Kenyatta started, and then, of course, the handshake with his former rival, Honorable Raila Odinga. What happened between the two of you? And I'll ask you this because when the two of you were, I'm going to say the Kenyan way, were roasting at the ICC, you both got exonerated, you went back to Kenya.
Yes.
You became like brothers. You actually used to dress the same way, same suits, same ties. I mean, Kenyans were mesmerized. The world was. The people who knew, oh, these guys came back, they are like brothers, they are fighting, they want to become president and deputy president. You worked it out. And you see, for Kenyans, they yearn for cohesion, they yearn for harmony. And they hadn't seen that in a long time. This is a country of more than 40 ethnic languages and communities. So they saw something good in that, and they voted you in. The first term went well. The second term, where did the fallout between you, Deputy President Ruto, and President Uhuru Kenyatta come from? What happened? Tell us.
History is going to be written one day, and I'm sure details will be out there. But let me say the following. In our first term, we were focused as a government on delivery of our plan. And that is why our first term stands out. Every legacy program President Uhuru Kenyatta will go home with is the programs of the first term. Whether you talk about the SGR, whether you talk about our road network, whether we talk about our electricity connection, whether you talk about the equipment we have supplied in our referral hospitals, whether we talk about the TVET program, that's all first term.
Fine, but what happened?
Second term,
because we got a lot of stuff we need to get to.
Second term, we got ourselves engaged in this handshake that was built to be an exercise to bring people together. And as President Kenyatta has said, I was briefed. President Kenyatta informed me. In fact, before Raila Odinga engaged President Kenyatta, he tried to engage me. And it's in the public domain.
But is there anything wrong to build bridges?
Absolutely. There is no
Wasn't that
problem.
the good thing? Like, reach out to the opposition, build Kenya?
There was no problem. But the things we had agreed upon as forming part of the handshake, it mutated into something else. We didn't discuss, for example, that it would be an exercise to kill the opposition and to kill oversight. We didn't discuss, for example, that members of the ruling party would be jettisoned so that members of the opposition can occupy committees in parliament. We didn't agree, for example, that this was an exercise in changing the constitution. And we didn't agree that this was an exercise in succession.
Before Uhuru Kenyatta, you and Raila Odinga were working together. You were in the opposition with him. Until, of course, this elephant of ICC came, and then, you found yourselves together. Of course, you came back, like we said, you became good friends, you worked for the government, things were moving, and people were happy. But things didn't go well. So the two of them have been your friends. But now, you're not.
For your information, Esther, we started ODM, all of us together. President Kenyatta, myself, Raila Odinga, and many others.
Okay.
Right? So as to being on the same side, yes, we've been on the same side. But when you work with people, then you discover there are people you can work with, and there are people you can't work with. And I have absolutely no problem with the handshake. The only problem I have with it is it became what we didn't agree it to be.
It's breaking. I need help with it. All right, that was Kenya's Deputy President, William Ruto. Still to come, highlights from the Basketball Africa League. But first, Haiti Adams has what's on tap for Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
Join me, Haiti Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa. As Russian aggression towards Ukraine plunges the world into uncertainty, we'll discuss what the situation in Eastern Europe means for Africa. What is at stake for the continent? We'll also speak to Africans caught in the conflict.
My family, friends are now in Ukraine. My mother and grandmother, they're now in Kiev. They have been living and sleeping in bomb shelters and underground parking for the last couple of nights.
An in-depth discussion on the war in Ukraine on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Returning now to the crisis in Ukraine, I'm joined live from Lviv by Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther. Philip, update us on Russia's proposed humanitarian corridors.
Yeah, well, those are humanitarian corridors that were unilaterally decided by Russia. They would have been, we don't know at this point, accompanied by a ceasefire. And the idea was that would-be refugees would be able to flee the cities that are either besieged or are surrounded by Russian troops, or cities where fighting has simply been ongoing for these 12 days of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Those cities being Kiev, Kharkiv in the north, but also Mariupol in the southeast. Now, the problem with these humanitarian corridors that have been proposed by Russia is that they essentially go in the wrong direction, that people don't want to be going in. They go towards the country that is attacking them. They go also toward Russia, of course. They also go toward Belarus, a country that has staged Russian attacks. The question is, of course, how many people who have suffered these bombing raids by Russia over the last 12 days would want to flee to precisely those countries. Most of them want to come here to the west of Ukraine, which is safe at this point and gives refugees the possibility to flee into the European Union and Poland, for example, but also the likes of Romania, Hungary and Slovakia on this side of the border. Remember also that yesterday there was supposed to be ceasefires and humanitarian corridors around the city of Mariupol in the southeast. Those were not respected by Russia 2 days in a row. Russia shelling civilians on both days, leading to an end of those proposed ceasefires that had been agreed upon by Ukraine and Russia.
What more can you tell us, Philip, on the advance of Russian troops into Ukraine?
Well, most military experts would tell you that there are absolutely advances. It's as simple as that. Russian forces are moving into Ukraine further and further along the paths that they appear to have had planned since the beginning. Now, those advances have been stalled, especially on the outskirts of Kiev, the capital city, but they are getting slower. We know that one of the tactics from the Russian military is to encircle the capital city, Kiev, essentially. They're getting that little bit closer toward doing that. Russian forces present in some of the suburbs around Kiev right now. There's also a plan by the Russian military to establish a land border, if you will, a land bridge between the Russian-occupied east and Russian annexed Crimea, and that is why the city of Mariupol is such a critical city and one that is being fought over so fiercely. There are very fierce combats there, fighting between Russia and Ukraine right now. So essentially the analysis from most sides and also from the Biden administration is clearly that things are going a little bit slower than expected from the Kremlin, but that these advances are still happening, with over 90%, according to the Pentagon, of Russian forces that were amassed on the borders between Russia and Ukraine and Belarus and Ukraine now being inside the country.
Philip, I believe you'll update us more maybe tomorrow on the refugee crisis, as well as the de-escalation talks that are ongoing to see whether this crisis can come to an end. Philip, thank you so much. Philip Crowther. All right, now to our coverage of Basketball Africa League. The Seydou Legacy Athletic Club of Guinea came from behind to win the opening game of the Sahara Conference, beating the Dakar University Club of Senegal 85-70 at the Dakar Arena Saturday. VOA's Jackson Vungani reports.
Chris Opekpa slammed down a 200 dunk to keep slack close early in the first quarter.
That is absolutely outstanding. Look at that.
Diop caught a rebound off Mbaye's miss and threw a long pass to Hadim Ali, who made a long three after a few dribbles.
Ali for three! Oh, it's gone in. It's a beauty.
Ali returned the favor with a nice inside pass to Diop, who finished with a two-handed dunk.
Oh, that pass is sumptuous. Look at that.
Josh Nzako of Slack fed Dan Miller Jr. with an inside pass to bag 2 points for Slack, keeping them close in the second half. Marcus Crawford found Opekpa with a nice pass at the top of the key, who made his way to the bucket for a layup.
So easy, beautifully done.
Diako found Opekpa with a beautiful inside pass for a dunk as Slack went ahead of Duke 51-50 for a first time in the third quarter. Miller Jr. keyed up Marcus Crawford at the top of the arc for another three-pointer as Slack started to pull away towards the end of the third quarter. Marcus Crawford, who finished as the highest scorer with 30 points, made another three-pointer off a pass by Miller Jr. to seal the win for Slack in the opening game of the Sahara Conference.
Rwanda's energy group, REG, game defeated Morocco's AS Saleh 91-87. Jackson Vunganyi continues with the highlights.
Rwanda's Dieudonne Ndayisabandize got a basket in halfway through the first quarter, not to fall far behind Morocco.
And that was beautifully done, wasn't it?
Morocco's Abdelmajid El Madini got the ball to Zakaria El Masbahi, who passed it to Terrell de von Stoglin, who made it to the basket and scored it to keep up their lead.
Dropping it in. Beautiful layup.
Down by 7 halfway through the third quarter, Rwanda's Adonis Fila hits a three.
Three coming in from downtown.
Up by 2 in the fourth quarter, Fila came through with a pass to Anthony Rashad Walker for a one-handed dunk.
Oh, look at that. That is just ridiculous. Ridiculous. Put that play to bed.
All about momentum. As I say it again, sky's over. Bukashu, and we have our first BL poster in 2022.
Fila kept it going with a pass to El Kaji, who missed a three-point shot, but Cleveland Joseph Thomas Jr. was there to rebound and drop it in.
Look at that. That is just brilliant.
With 7 minutes remaining in the game, Fila finds Walker again for another dunk to bump up Reg's lead.
Look at it. This is just impressive. Walker coming in and slamming it down.
Down by 3 with 4 minutes left, AS Saleh's Khalid Bokichu loses control of the ball with Rwanda's Walker passing to Cleveland Thomas Jr. for 2 points.
Doing it again.
AS Saleh's Terrell von Stoglin makes a 2-point basket with a minute and a half left and down by 3. But Reg gets this win.
And finally, Union Sportive Monastirien of Tunisia defeated Club Ferroviario da Beira of Mozambique 77-71. And here are the highlights.
Majok's early block against Beira's Ubise sends the ball to Dixon, who races across the court for a basket.
Beats Perry and drops it in. That is sensational stuff.
Monastir loses the ball under Beira's basket, leading to a pass from Numande to Wana for a basket that pulls Beira within 3 points in the second quarter.
Beautiful score indeed from El.
Sliman gets a possession off a broken play and races across the court for a nice layup.
Nice, very nice. A very slick maneuver there.
Beira pulls ahead by a point early in the fourth quarter with a basket for Orizu. Monastir answers right back with a number of touches, leading to a basket by Laihani. Ahead by 2 points with 4 minutes to go, Dixon sets up Majok for a two-handed dunk. Majok scores another layup to extend the lead for Monastir.
Here he goes again, Majok.